Hello and welcome to the Oasis. I'm so glad you found your way here. Tonight is all about you. It's your time to escape, to unwind, and to let go. You're about to step into a world crafted purely from imagination, a collection of stories designed to carry you far away from the hustle and bustle of your day. So find a comfortable spot, take a deep breath, and allow your mind to settle. Let the sound of my voice be your guide as we journey into another realm together. If these tales bring you a sense of peace and wonder, a simple tap on the like button and a click on subscribe would mean the world. Your support is what allows me to continue creating these immersive escapes for you to enjoy. Story 1. The Village That Wasn't on Any Map. My name is Sarah Chen, and I'm a travel blogger. I've visited 73 countries, hiked through jungles, explored forgotten temples, and slept in hostels that barely had running water. But nothing, and I mean nothing, prepared me for what I found in the mountains of Romania 3 years ago. This is the story of how I stumbled into a place that shouldn't exist and how I barely made it out alive. It started with a wrong turn. Classic, right? I was driving through the Carpathian Mountains, heading toward a monastery I'd read about online. My GPS had stopped working about an hour earlier, and my phone had no signal. The road had narrowed to barely more than a dirt path, winding through dense forest where the trees grew so thick that even at noon, it felt like twilight. I should have turned back. Every instinct told me to. But I'm stubborn, and I'd driven too far to give up. That's when I saw the sign. It was old, wooden, half-rotted, with words carved in Romanian that I could barely make out. Saddle Umbra, Shadow Village. Below it, someone had scratched a warning in English. Turn back. Of course, I didn't turn back. The village appeared suddenly, as if the forest had simply opened its mouth and revealed it. About 20 houses, all built in the same ancient style with steep roofs and dark timber. Smoke rose from a few chimneys, but I saw no people. No cars, no power lines. It was like stepping through a portal into the past. I parked my rental car at the edge of the village and got out. The silence was oppressive. No birds, no wind, just my footsteps on the packed earth and my own breathing. Hello? I called out. My voice sounded small, swallowed by the stillness. A door creaked open at the nearest house. An old woman emerged, her face so wrinkled it looked like crumpled paper. She stared at me with milky eyes, then spoke in rapid Romanian. I caught a few words: leave, dark, before. I don't understand, I said, pulling out my phone to use the translation app. Still no signal, she grabbed my wrist. Her grip was surprisingly strong, her fingers like iron. She pulled me toward my car, speaking urgently, frantically. I tried to pull away, tried to explain I just needed directions, but she wouldn't let go. Then the church bell rang. The old woman's face went white. She released me and ran back into her house, slamming the door. I heard locks clicking, one after another. The bell rang again, deep and resonant, though I couldn't see a church anywhere. And then I realized the sun was setting. How was that possible? It had been noon when I arrived. Doors began opening. People emerged from the houses, but something was wrong with them. They moved in perfect synchronization, their heads turning toward me as one. Their faces were blank, emotionless. About 30 of them, men, women, even children, all walking toward me in complete silence. I ran to my car. My hands shook as I fumbled with the keys, dropping them once before finally getting the door open. The villagers were closer now, forming a circle around my vehicle. They didn't rush. They didn't need to. They moved with the certainty of people who knew I had nowhere to go. I started the engine. The headlights flared to life, and in that moment I saw their shadows. Or rather, I saw that they had none. These people standing in my headlights cast no shadows at all. The old woman appeared at my window. She was crying now, mouthing words I couldn't hear over the blood pounding in my ears. She pointed behind the villagers, toward a narrow gap between two houses. I didn't think. I slammed the accelerator and drove straight at the crowd. They didn't move, they just stood there as my car plowed through them. Except my car didn't hit them. I passed through them like they were smoke, like they were nothing at all. The gap the old woman had pointed to led to an overgrown path. My car barely fit, branches scraping the paint, rocks grinding under the tires. I didn't care. I drove like my life depended on it, because it did. In my rearview mirror, I saw the village. The people were standing in a line, watching me go. And behind them, the buildings were fading, becoming transparent, as if they were being erased from reality. I drove for 3 hours straight, not stopping until I hit a major highway. When I finally checked my dashcam footage later, because yes, I always record my drives, there was nothing, just forest. The timestamp showed I'd lost 4 hours. I reported it to local police, who looked at me like I was crazy. There was no village called Saddle Umbra in that region. There never had been, but I have proof I was there. On my phone, which suddenly regained all its functions once I hit the highway, I found a single photo I don't remember taking. It's blurry, dark, but you can make out the wooden sign and those 2 words, "Turn back." And in the corner of the image, barely visible, is the old woman's face pressed against a window. Behind her, in the darkness of the house, are dozens of other faces, all watching, all waiting. I never went back. I never will. But sometimes late at night I check my location history from that day. And according to my phone, for those 4 missing hours, I wasn't in Romania at all. I was nowhere. Just a blank spot on the map. A place that doesn't exist. The old woman saved me that day, but I still don't know from what. Were those people ghosts? Some kind of dimensional trap? All I know is that somewhere in those mountains, there's a village that appears to travelers who take the wrong turn. And most of them, I suspect, never leave. I'm one of the lucky ones. But lucky is a relative term when you wake up every night wondering, what if I had stayed just 5 minutes longer? What if the old woman hadn't warned me? What if next time, and there's always a next time in these mountains, someone else takes that turn? I don't travel to remote places anymore. I stick to cities, to places with cell service and GPS signals. Because I learned that some destinations aren't meant to be found. And some villages aren't villages at all. There's something wearing the skin of one, waiting in the shadows between the maps for the next curious traveler to arrive. If you ever find yourself on a mountain road and you see a sign warning you to turn back, for God's sake, listen to it. Thanks for listening. If you enjoy stories like this, be sure to subscribe. Story 2. The Island of Perpetual Dusk. For 15 years, I've studied the ocean's deepest, most isolated corners. I've seen bioluminescent creatures in trenches and caves that haven't known sunlight for millennia. But 2 years ago, I found something that made me question everything I thought I knew about the natural world. This is the story of an island that should be impossible, and the week I spent there that I still can't fully explain. It was supposed to be a routine expedition, mapping reef systems in the South Pacific, hundreds of miles from anywhere. We'd been at sea for 3 weeks when our sonar picked up a landmass that wasn't on any of our charts. Our navigator, Jenny, was baffled. "That's weird," she said, pulling up 3 different maps. "Nothing. It's not on any of them." I figured it was just an error, but curiosity took over. I said, "Let's take a closer look." As we approached, the island materialized from the mist like a dream. It was small, maybe 2 miles across, covered in a dense jungle with a mountain at its center. But the light was all wrong. It was 2 in the afternoon, yet the island was bathed in the soft, golden light of a perpetual sunset. The sky above it swirled with orange, purple, and deep red, while the sky around us was clear and blue. "What the hell?" Jenny whispered. We anchored offshore. I took a small boat to the beach with 2 team members, Danny and Reiko. The sand was black and fine, volcanic. As we stepped onto the shore, I felt a strange resistance in the air, like walking through a membrane. Danny checked his watch and frowned. My watch stopped. We all checked ours. Every single timepiece, digital and analog, had frozen at exactly 6:47 p.m. Equipment malfunction? Reiko suggested, but she sounded doubtful. We found ruins near the shore, ancient stone structures overgrown with vines, covered in symbols I'd never seen. They didn't match any Pacific culture I knew. We should document this, I said, pulling out my camera. But the screen just showed static. That's when we heard it. Singing. It came from deeper in the jungle, a melody that seemed to resonate right in my chest. I didn't recognize the language, but somehow I understood the meaning. Welcome. You've been expected. We should go back, Danny said, his face pale. But I was already moving toward the sound. I know, in every horror movie you scream at the guy not to investigate the creepy sound. But this felt different. The singing didn't feel threatening, it felt like coming home. The jungle itself was impossible. I recognized the plants, ferns, palms, orchids, but they were all growing together. Arctic moss next to tropical flowers. Desert succulents beside mangroves. It was like every ecosystem on Earth had been compressed into this one small island. We found her in a clearing. A woman, or at least she had the shape of a woman. Her skin shifted colors, reflecting the strange light, and her eyes were solid black like pools of oil. She was the source of the singing. When she saw us, she stopped and smiled. "Travelers," she said in perfect English. "It has been so long," I managed to ask. "Who are you?" "I am the keeper. This is the Threshold Island." "The place between places," she gestured around us. "You found one of the hinges of the world." "That doesn't make any sense," Reiko said. The keeper replied, "No, it wouldn't. Not to minds bound by linear time. This island exists in the margins, the spaces where reality breathes, between day and night, between sea and land, between now and then." "This is crazy," Danny muttered. "We need to leave." The keeper's voice was gentle but firm. "You can't leave. Not until the island decides you may. Some stay for hours. Some stay for years. Time works differently here." Panic began to rise in my chest. "We have a ship, a crew waiting. Do you?" she asked, pointing toward the beach. We ran back through the jungle. When we emerged, the beach was empty. Our boat was gone. Our ship was gone. The ocean stretched out endlessly, and that impossible frozen sunset hung in the exact same position. "This isn't real," Reiko said, her voice shaking. "We're hallucinating. Maybe there's some kind of spore in the air." The keeper had followed us. "This is more real than anything you've ever known. Your world, with its clocks and calendars and certainties, that is the illusion. Here, you see things as they truly are. We spent what we thought was the first day trying to rationalize it. We walked the entire island. It took 4 hours, but the sun never moved an inch. On the second day, we noticed we weren't getting hungry or tired. Our bodies existed in the same frozen state as everything else. On the third day, we started seeing others. Figures moving through the jungle. Some looked human, others definitely weren't. The keeper explained that the island attracted travelers from many places, many times. Some from our Earth, from different eras. Others from places that didn't have names in our language. I asked, "You're telling me this is some kind of interdimensional way station?" She replied, "If that helps you understand, yes." On the 5th day, I stopped fighting it. There was a peace to the island, a timelessness that was almost comforting. No deadlines, no responsibilities. Just the eternal dusk and the sound of waves that never quite reached the shore. But Danny was unraveling. "We're dead," he kept saying. "We died, and this is some kind of afterlife." The keeper just assured him, You're not dead. You're just displaced. On what felt like the seventh day, I woke to find the light had changed. Real, harsh sunlight was breaking through the trees. The spell was breaking. The keeper appeared one last time. The island has decided. You may leave now. I had to ask. Why? Why did it bring us here? She said, the island doesn't bring anyone. You found it because, on some level, you needed to. You needed to see that reality is larger and stranger than your instruments can measure. She touched my forehead. Don't forget, we found our boat on the beach, exactly where we'd left it. When we reached our ship, the crew was confused. Where have you been? Jenny demanded. You've been gone for 20 minutes. We were about to come looking for you. 20 minutes. We had spent 7 days on that island, and only 20 minutes had passed in the real world. We spent 3 more days searching for the island, using every tool we had. It was gone. Or it had never been there at all, but I have proof. The 3 of us who went ashore now have the same mark on our wrists, a symbol like the ones from the ruins. It seems to shift, never quite the same when you look at it twice, and sometimes late at night I still hear the singing. That wordless melody that means welcome, that means home. I dream about the Threshold Island, and part of me wants to find it again. But another part knows that if I do, I might not come back, or I might come back to find that centuries have passed. I still work as a marine biologist, but now I know that in the forgotten corners of the world, there are places where reality is thinner, places where the impossible is just another form of truth. And if you ever find yourself on an island where the sun never moves and your watch stops, remember, the island will let you go when it's ready, not before. All you can do is wait and try not to forget who you were before you arrived. Because the Threshold Island doesn't just exist in space. It exists in you, a reminder that the world is so much stranger than we pretend it is. Story 3. The Train to Nowhere. My name is Elena Volkov, and I used to be a photographer for National Geographic. Used to be. After what happened on the Trans-Siberian Railway, I can't bring myself to travel anymore. I've seen enough. This is the story of how I boarded a train that exists between destinations, and met passengers who were never meant to arrive. I was in Russia, documenting one of the world's longest train routes. 9,000 kilometers of forests, mountains, and endless steppe from Moscow to Vladivostok. I'd made the journey twice before, but this time something went very, very wrong. I'd boarded at Yekaterinburg at exactly 11:37 p.m., car number 7, compartment 12. The train pulled away right on schedule, and I settled in. The first sign that something was off came about an hour later. I went to the dining car for tea. It was empty except for one other passenger, an old man in a Soviet-era uniform, his chest covered in medals I didn't recognize. Quite a collection, I said in Russian. He looked at me with cloudy eyes. I earned everyone. The Battle of Kursk, the Siege of Leningrad, stories no one wants to hear anymore. Everyone I knew is gone. He sipped his tea. I asked, how long have you been on this train? I told him I'd just boarded an hour ago. He just shook his head slowly. No, you didn't. None of us did. We all think we just boarded, but we've been riding forever. Before I could respond, he stood and vanished into the next car. I went back to my compartment, but the rhythm of the train felt wrong. It was too constant. A train's movement always has a pattern, speeding up, slowing down, taking curves. This train just moved in one continuous, unchanging hum. No stops, no variations. When morning should have arrived, I checked my phone. No signal, which wasn't unusual. But my clock showed 11:37 p.m., the exact time I'd boarded. My watch was the same. The second hand was moving, but the time was frozen. I went to find the conductor. The hallway seemed to stretch impossibly far. From behind the closed compartment doors, I heard strange sounds, weeping, laughter, prayers in languages I didn't recognize. Finally, I found the conductor's cabin. The door was open. Inside, a woman in uniform sat at a desk, writing names in a ledger with an actual quill pen. "Excuse me," I said. "When's our next stop?" She didn't look up. "There are no stops on this line." "That's not possible," I insisted. "Every train stops eventually. Not this one. This is the night train. The service that never ends." She finally raised her eyes. They were completely black. "You're Elena Volkov, yes? Photographer. Born 1983. Boarded at Yekaterinburg, seeking to document a journey. How do you know my name?" She tapped the ledger. "Everyone who boards gets entered. Your name is here, but there's no destination listed. Just like everyone else." My blood ran cold. This is insane. "I want off this train." "Of course you do," she said calmly. "Everyone does eventually. But the night train only stops when it chooses to, and it only lets off those it's finished with." I ran. I tried every exit door. All locked. Through the window, the landscape passed by, but it wasn't changing. The same stretch of forest, the same trees, over and over like a looped film strip. We were riding through a phantom world. Over the next few days, or what felt like days, I met the other passengers. The old soldier who said he'd been riding since 1943. A woman in a 1920s dress fleeing the revolution. A businessman from the 90s who boarded to escape his debts. A teenager with a backpack whose ticket was dated 2003, though he insisted he'd only been on for a few hours. We were all trapped in our own moment of 11:37 p.m., riding an impossible train through a landscape that never changed. "It feeds on us," the old soldier told me. "Our stories, our memories, our regrets. That's what keeps it moving." The train doesn't run on coal or electricity. It runs on the weight of all our unfinished business. I tried to photograph it to document this impossible place. But every image came out black or showed things that weren't there: endless corridors. Faces pressed against windows from the outside. Symbols written on the walls in languages that hurt my eyes to look at. On the 5th day, I found a map. It showed the route of the night train. The path was impossible. It curved back on itself, passed through mountains that didn't exist, and crossed phantom rivers. The entire route formed a strange symbol. "A sigil. It's a trap," said a woman named Anastasia, the one in the 1920s dress. She was faded like an old photograph. "A trap for souls in transition. We all boarded because we were running from something, or toward something. We were between destinations, and that's when the night train finds you." Her words hit me hard. "There has to be a way off," I insisted. "There is," she whispered. "Let go of what you're running from, or accept you'll never reach what you're running to. The train only keeps those who are stuck in their own story." I spent the next day thinking about why I was really on that train. I told myself it was for work, but that was a lie. I was running. I was always running from one assignment to the next, never staying anywhere, never connecting. My whole life was about being in transit, never arriving. The night train had found me because I was already on it, metaphorically. It just made the metaphor terrifyingly real. On the 7th day, I went back to the conductor's cabin. "I understand now," I told her. "I know why I'm here. I've been on this train my whole life, always moving, never arriving. I want to stop running. I want to arrive." She studied me for a long moment, then picked up her quill and drew a single line through my name in her ledger. "Next stop is yours." For the first time, I felt the train begin to slow. The landscape outside became real again: snow-covered trees, small villages, a real dawn breaking on the horizon. The train pulled into a station I didn't recognize. I grabbed my things and stepped onto the platform. The cold air hit me like a blessing. Behind me, the night train waited. Through the windows, I could see the others watching me leave. the old soldier, Anastasia, the businessman. All the souls still trapped, unable or unwilling to let go. The conductor appeared in the doorway. "You're one of the lucky ones," she said. "Most never understand. They ride forever. What about them?" I asked. "They'll get off when they're ready." "Or they won't. The night train has nothing but time." The doors closed, and the train began to move, accelerating smoothly back into impossibility. Within seconds, it had vanished completely, as if it had never been there at all. I checked my phone. It was 6:23 a.m., 3 days after I'd boarded. I was in a small town 500 kilometers from where I should have been. I flew home. I never finished the documentary. How could I? But I kept one photograph. It was blank at first, but after a few weeks, an image started to appear, developing on its own. It shows the night train, dark against the darker sky, with familiar faces in every window. Sometimes late at night I hear a train whistle in the distance, even though there are no tracks near my home. I know it's the night train, still running its impossible route, still collecting passengers caught between destinations. So if you ever find yourself on a train and notice the stops have ended, if you check your watch and time has frozen, ask yourself, what am I running from? And what am I running toward? Because the train is still out there, still moving, still collecting souls in transition. And one day, you might hear its whistle calling for you. My name is Tanya, and I've backpacked across dozens of countries. I've seen it all, or so I thought. I'm used to cheap hostels, you know the kind. Simple beds, shared kitchens, and a revolving door of friendly strangers. But last autumn, when I was trekking through a remote mountain region, I found a place that defied all logic. It wasn't listed anywhere online. No reviews, no photos, absolutely nothing. I should have seen that as a massive red flag. Instead, I took it as a challenge, a hidden gem waiting to be discovered. I stepped inside, not into a hostel, but into a living nightmare that pretended to be lodging. This is the story of the mountain hostel that checked itself in. I'd arrived late, much later than I planned. A sudden landslide had completely blocked the main road, forcing me on a grueling detour. I had to trek for 3 extra hours as the daylight slowly bled away. By the time I finally stumbled into the small, quiet settlement, the sky was a deep, bruised purple. The air was cold and thin. I was exhausted, and all I wanted was a bed. I found a small, dusty shop that was still open and asked the old man behind the counter for the nearest hostel. He just pointed down a narrow, winding stone path that disappeared into the trees. "You'll see a house with a lantern outside," he said, his voice low. Then he added, "But try to leave early tomorrow." "Why?" I asked, a little confused. He just hesitated for a moment, his eyes darting towards the path. "Just leave early." I figured he was warning me about the unpredictable mountain weather. I thanked him and started down the path. It was darker here, under the canopy of ancient trees. The path led me to a 2-story wooden house, standing alone in a clearing. A single old-fashioned lantern flickered at the entrance, casting long dancing shadows. What was strange was that no one was outside to maintain it, yet it burned steadily against the growing wind. The whole place felt eerily silent. As I reached the porch, the heavy wooden door creaked open before I even had a chance to knock. A woman stepped out of the shadows. She was tall and unervingly thin, with a smile that was perfectly calm, almost frozen on her face. "Welcome, traveler," she said, her voice smooth as silk. "We've been expecting you." A shiver went down my spine. I hadn't told anyone I was coming. "I'm sorry," I said. "I think there's been a mistake." "I didn't book a room." Her smile widened, stretching just a little too far, looking unnatural. "Of course you did," she replied, her tone unwavering. "You checked in yesterday. Before I could even begin to process that bizarre statement, she gestured for me to come inside. Every instinct screamed at me to turn around and run, but I was so tired, and the thought of another hour in the dark was unbearable. I stepped over the threshold, and the door swung shut behind me with a soft, final click. Something about the inside felt deeply wrong. It was too quiet, too still. The wooden floorboards, which looked ancient, didn't creak under my weight. There wasn't a single speck of dust anywhere. It looked clean impossibly, perfectly clean, like a museum exhibit no one had ever touched. Yet when she led me to the reception desk, the ledger lying open on the counter was filled with names. Hundreds of them, written in different scripts, spanning decades. My room was on the second floor. It was simple: a bed, a chair, a small dresser. Everything was neatly arranged, too neat. It felt staged. I dropped my heavy backpack and sat on the edge of the bed, the silence of the house pressing in on me. Despite my unease, exhaustion won. I fell into a deep, dreamless sleep. Sometime in the dead of night, I woke up. I wasn't sure what had disturbed me, but I was wide awake, my heart pounding, and then I heard it. Saw footsteps just outside my door. They were slow, dragging footsteps like someone was pulling a great weight. Then, a soft voice whispered through the wood, a voice that was both gentle and chilling. "Why did you leave your room yesterday?" I froze, sitting bolt upright in the darkness. My blood ran cold. "I wasn't here yesterday," I whispered back, my voice trembling. There was only silence. Then the doorknob began to turn, slowly, agonizingly slowly. I scrambled out of bed and threw my entire body against the door, holding the knob with all my strength. The thing on the other side started to push. It was strong, inhumanly strong. The wood of the door frame began to groan and splinter. I could feel the sheer, bone-snapping force against my hands. I screamed, a raw, terrified sound that was swallowed by the house. And just as suddenly as it started, everything stopped. The pressure vanished. The silence returned, thicker and more menacing than before. I stayed pressed against the door for what felt like hours, listening to my own frantic heartbeat until the first gray light of dawn crept through the window. When morning finally came, I didn't even bother to pack. I grabbed my bag and rushed downstairs. The reception desk was empty. The woman was gone, but the ledger was still there, open to a new page. My name was written on it twice, once under yesterday's date, and once under today's. A cold dread washed over me. "You must stay." The voice came from directly behind me. I spun around. It was the woman from the night before, standing so close I hadn't heard her approach. She was smiling that same placid, terrifying smile. "You're part of the house now," she said calmly. That was it. I didn't respond. I didn't even think. I just ran. But the hostel wasn't going to let me go. As I sprinted down the main hallway, it began to change. The corridor stretched, elongating into an impossible tunnel. Doors that were there a second ago vanished, replaced by solid wood. Rooms seemed to replicate themselves, creating a dizzying, repeating pattern. The grand staircase I'd come up now twisted in directions that defied gravity, leading back into the very house I was trying to escape. The hostel wasn't just a building. It was a living, breathing entity, shifting its own insides to trap me. It was a predator. As I ran, doors slammed shut on their own with concussive force. Windows melted away into blank walls. The entire house seemed to be absorbing its own passages, like a giant beast rearranging its ribs to crush its prey. Panic was setting in. I was lost in a maze that was actively fighting me. Finally, I burst into what looked like the kitchen. It was the only room that seemed normal, and through the steam and shadows I saw it. A single grimy window looking out onto the grass. Without a second thought, I climbed onto the counter, braced myself, and hurled my body through the glass. I hit the ground hard, rolling onto the wet grass as shards of glass rained down around me. I scrambled to my feet and looked back. Behind me, the lantern on the porch flickered violently, and the wooden beams of the house groaned and creaked with a low, guttural sound, almost as if it was roaring in anger. I didn't wait to see what would happen next. I ran. I ran until my lungs burned, and I reached the main settlement again. The old shopkeeper was standing outside his store. He just looked at me, his expression grim. "You stayed there, didn't you?" he asked quietly. I could only nod, gasping for breath. He shook his head slowly. "No one stays there twice," he whispered. "And no one leaves twice, either." I turned around, looking back towards the path. The house was gone. Not destroyed or burned down. It was just gone. In its place were only trees and unbroken earth, as if it had never existed at all. I thought it was over. I made my way back to civilization, back to my normal life. But 2 days later, as I was unpacking my backpack at home, hundreds of miles away, something heavy fell out and clattered on my floor. It was a room key. A heavy, ornate metal key. Attached to it was a small tag. The inscription read, "Your stay continues, return soon," and that night, as I sat alone in my apartment, someone knocked on my door. 3 slow, deliberate knocks, exactly like the ones I'd heard outside my room at the hostel. Thanks for listening to my story. Be careful where you stay on your travels. Sometimes the most welcoming places are the ones you can never leave. If you enjoyed this, please like and subscribe for more tales from the road. Stay safe out there. The road that wasn't on the map. My name is Arthur, and I've always loved solo travel, especially the kind that takes you far away from tourist crowds and into the quiet, forgotten corners of the world. I tell myself it's for adventure, but honestly, I think I chase the feeling of being completely alone, surrounded by the unknown. But last winter, that hunger for the unfamiliar took me somewhere I should never have gone. And what I found, what followed me back, still keeps me awake on those nights. This is the story of the road that wasn't on the map. I was driving through the eastern hills, planning a 2-day detour to visit an old friend. The air was cold, and the fog kept rolling across the road like slow-moving ghosts. My GPS kept losing signal, so I relied on an old printed map I had stuffed in my backpack. Around 4 p.m., I reached a deserted junction. According to the map, the road on the right simply didn't exist. No marking, no mention. Just blank space. Yet a small wooden sign leaned quickly next to it. Hand-painted letters read, "Short route to Darpani to 12 kilometers." I should have ignored it, but curiosity, that's where horror is born. The moment I turned onto that path, my radio died. The fog thickened instantly, swirling like it was alive. The trees on either side grew wild branches twisted in unnatural angles, like they had been burned and regrown wrong. 10 minutes in, my headlights caught a figure on the side of the road. A woman. She stood absolutely still, wearing a pale blue shawl that fluttered even though there was no wind. Her face was hidden behind her hair. I slowed down, expecting her to look up. She didn't. But as I passed, she whispered something. Not at me, but to the forest. My steering wheel jerked sharply to the left on its own. The car skidded, narrowly avoiding a tree. Heart racing, I pressed on. The road grew narrower, barely wide enough for my Jeep. My GPS suddenly flickered back on, but what it showed made no sense. My car icon was spinning in place. Then the woman appeared again. Same shawl, same posture, same whispering, but this time, she was on the opposite side of the road. My skin crawled. I accelerated. She appeared again and again and again. Always facing away, always whispering. Sometimes closer to the vehicle than before, I yelled into the empty road, "What do you want?" The whispering stopped. For the first time, she turned her head. Her face had no mouth. Just long, deep slits where a mouth should have been stitched shut with black thread. I slammed the accelerator. The road suddenly ended. A sheer drop opened before me. I yanked the wheel, barely saving myself as the Jeep spun into the dirt. The woman stepped out of the fog, reaching toward me with fingers that were far too long. I scrambled out and ran into the forest. Branches scratched my face. Thorns dug into my palms, but fear pushed me forward. I ran until I collapsed right onto a paved highway. A passing truck stopped. The driver stared at me like I was mad. "There's no road there," he said. "Just cliffside. Has been for years." I didn't look back. But every night since, when the world is quiet, I hear that whispering again, soft, steady, threading its way into my dreams. And sometimes I wake up to find pale blue fabric on my floor, covered in black stitching. And that brings us to the end of our story tonight. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey. If you found yourself captivated by the tale and want to explore more worlds like this one, I'd be so grateful if you could take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Every like, every comment, and every new subscriber truly makes a difference. It's your support that fuels this creative fire and allows me to continue bringing these stories from my imagination to your screen. There are so many more adventures I want to share with you, so many more mysteries to unravel. By subscribing, you'll be the first to know when the next chapter begins. So until we meet again for another story, rest well, sleep deeply, and always stay curious. Thanks for listening.